Hey guys, thank you for joining. Oh, there you are. So I'm very thankful, there you go, that you're here today. And so excited to have a conversation with Jill from Everveda. So some of you may know me, some of you may know Jill, and I think we should all know each other. Hi, Jill.
Hi, sweetie. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, I can see you, and I'm really happy to
Wow,
see
this is
you. That's it. I
yay!
know, we're here. It's like magic. So,
Wow.
yeah, I know. So, here's my reasoning behind this. Every time I've had a conversation with you in the history of our conversations, I feel like I can talk to you for a very long time. Our conversations are so juicy and so deep and so nourishing.
Yeah.
And so I feel like in our collective time of isolation, these types of conversations that we have in private are becoming increasingly more valuable to the public. So here we are. We can do that now. And I think
Yeah.
we have to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a great tool, right? I mean, it connects people from farther away than usual, and using it in that way is so great. I don't think we'll ever really be limited by that again, which is a good lesson. It's a good, it's something that really came out of this that was positive.
Yeah, and I was just listening to someone yesterday who I value speaking online saying that there is no way that we can go if we are business owners, which although we are sacred ancient yoga and Ayurveda practitioners, we're also business owners, that there's no way we can go into the next phase in the same way that we did the last phase. It's like the building has crumbled, right? So
Correct.
yeah. So as we rebuild it, I feel like we need to be creative and interconnected. And here
And
we are.
open, open, which is like the opposite of what we're being challenged to be. We're challenged to be isolated. We're challenged to be closed in, and really what ends up being um, the antidote to that is being open to the opportunity and the possibility of what we can make out of this. What can really come out of this. So I agree.
I, yeah, this word that you've chosen, which is open, is also a word that echoes in my psyche forever because I would say one of the more valuable tools of yoga, and there are so many, but one of the more valuable tools that's also challenging for us to practice is how what my main influence in yoga is Mr. Desikachar. So how he described this tool, which is Ishvara Pranidhanam, which we see
Mm.
in the second chapter, we see it in the first chapter, but in the second chapter, we see it in a very practical way. And for those of us who practice regularly and have a long time practice, we kind of have been lining things up to support our well-being and our students' well-beings for so long that this last part, which is in essence to surrender, he very beautifully described in one of our sessions as remaining open, right? So we've done all this work. We've reflected on what is important for the transformation of our microcosm and macrocosm. And then what? Well, then a pandemic comes along. So here we are being almost forced to be open if we want to continue in a way that is balanced.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. There's an interesting Shankaracharya, who is a philosopher from a certain time, you know him, and had
Yep.
spoken about satsang, and had spoken about the purpose of satsang, and in satsang, we can remove, by being in good company, which is a simple way of saying being, you know, with like-minded souls and being in satsang, you know, we can remove the deluded state of being, that we are alone, that we are isolated, that we are by ourselves. And the mind from being in satsang becomes steady and calm, just by, you know, by being and doing these concepts together. And when the mind is sattvic, which is steady and calm, that's when liberation occurs. So here we are, through this vehicle is really how we become ourselves. It's really how we kind of attain the truth of who we are. So rather than feel isolated and constricted, you know, here we have an opening. Here we have the opportunity. So it really does matter that we rely on each other and that we enter into satsang, we enter into community in this way. So, you know, I think that through that container, we can feel more free.
Yeah, you know, I have been feeling this so much that I don't know who's more thankful right now, my students or myself, that we have had the opportunity to punctuate our new life with the ritual of a formal class.
Yeah.
You know, it would really be a sadder experience for me to go through this without all of these beautiful souls who I have been connecting with over these months and years and decades. Our getting together infuses all of the days that we meet on with a feeling of interconnectedness. And at its essence, again, I'm going to allude to Desikachar many times when we
You should.
speak, yes, but his definition of yoga that many of his students and, you know, those who've learned in his system are familiar with is yoga is relationship. So whether it's Patanjali or, you know, the Bhagavad Gita or what Shankaracharya, whatever definitions of yoga that we go upon, I tend to look toward yoga is relationship as the essence of how all of these Indian systems flourish. They flourish via the teacher-student connection. And so as we continue to be, I'm a student to my students. I just want to put that out there. There's so much I learn from everyone every single day. But when we remain connected, then that's when the yoga happens. So
Agreed.
yeah. So I
And
I
that
agree with that, and
yeah, that's that container
go
for
ahead.
sure. The idea that we need to keep those connections, the essence of the connection. I mean, you know, I'm sure that I'm not the only one, but during this time, having walks with very important people in my life, being able to go outside and take a long walk with a friend, has enabled the essence of our connections. Maybe before it was we all got together for dinner, or we took a class together, or we went shopping together, or, you know, very simple, superficial things that kept us connected. But during this time, the essence of it is a walk or a chat or a practice. You know, the practices. And when you talk about relationship, we talk about not only the relationship to each other, but the relationship to ourselves within that paradigm, you know? And that's where ritual and routine and practices really anchor who we are during this time. So maybe it's a walk, or maybe it's the various forms of dinacharya that one learns in yoga and Ayurveda. this is the time to revisit them and give them some reverence. Really, really harbor them and anchor them into your life, because this is the essence. This is what we know to be the heart of the yoga and, of course, the Ayurveda.
Yes. So, can you talk a little bit more about dinacharya? Because I'm not sure that my students who will be seeing this are familiar with this concept. I mean, they're familiar with the lifestyle modifications that we do every day. However, the concept of dinacharya, I'd like you to give a small introduction to it, because I do feel like the workshop that you teach on Ayurveda for summer will be very much integrated with that concept. And I feel like it would be a great way to introduce what you're going to teach for us, which we're all very excited for.
Cool. Dinacharya literally means daily practice. It is the yoga practice, or the practice of yoga that you've learned, whether it's asana or any other type of yoga, the intellectual learning of yoga, the increased study, the selfless service, the karma yoga. But it's also, it can come down to how we take care of ourselves every day. We take care of the vehicle that's going to keep the senses clear and balanced, so that we can perceive reality. So we can perceive through our senses what reality has for us each day. You know, when you rinse your eyes, or when you rinse your nose or your ears, or you clear your palate with either oil pulling or tongue scraping, what you're really doing every day is you're lubricating and cleansing, lubricating and cleansing. This is the cycle of Ayurveda, to make sure that the senses are balanced. Now, there are two reasons why we want the senses to be so balanced. We want to be able to perceive reality correctly. We want to have the clarity of senses so we can impress, so reality can come to us as it is. You know, if we can't see with our eyes, or our ears are clogged, we won't be able to hear what's happening. We can't see what's happening. If our sinuses are clogged, we can't really ingest what's happening through the olfactory senses. The other purpose of it is so what's inside of us, what is actually true, who we really are, can emanate outward. Remember, it's two ways. You know, the essence of ourself has to be able to come out through these senses. These are the portals. These are the interface, whether it's touch, taste, smell, sight. So in taking care of them, in cleansing, restoring every day as a daily cycle, then we are every day protecting and presenting ourselves in the correct way. And so that's the purpose of dinacharya. And what that looks like is individual to the person. There are moving meditations, for example. Right. There is quiet meditation. There are different types of oils and fluids that can help to rinse the eyes, depending on the condition of the eyes. And since Ayurveda is so deeply connected to the patterns of nature, as it is outside, when we're getting into the summertime, we are going to change those practices so we can absorb the higher intensity of sunlight and the higher intensity of heat. We're going to pay attention to what the season is telling us, so we can ingest things that are going to balance us better than compared to what we're going to do in the winter, where we're going to change those things. So again, you know, it's a dynamic process and practice, but it is cleansing and restoring every day. Does that make sense?
It does. It does. And I think it also echoes a lot of what Krishnamacharya, Mr. Desikacharya's father, who really is He's really our portal into modern day yoga explosion. And I think that what he says is rather than take, just from a practical perspective, rather than take long fasts or have to take long vacations, fast a little bit. And I know Ayurveda says this as well, fast a little bit at every meal. I think Ayurveda says half full, fill your belly half with food, a quarter with liquid, and then leave a quarter empty so that everything can flow through, right? Mm-hmm. So same, there's this essence of moderation and daily renewal that happens when we live this way. Take a little vacation every day, in whatever that might look like for you.
Right. Do a little.
Your sound just went out for a second. I'm waiting for you to come back. All right, Jill, we lost you, but I'm going to get you back. There we go. Welcome back.
Okay. I've moved to another place. I've moved to the herb room because I think we're closer to the router that way.
I think that's a great idea. So let's segue. I want to talk about your recent email that you sent out because it really got me thinking. And I'm sure that what we are experiencing now as a humanity happened throughout the history of humanity. And that is what you touched on in your newsletter. And I also want to share a little bit about what yoga has to say about this, because I really hadn't thought about it. So this is another benefit of linking together in satsang with our like-minded, like-hearted, like-souled friends, is that it can spawn new trains of thought that are useful for us in our lives and in the lives of the people around us. So thank you for the reminder. And I would love it if you can talk about pandemic from the Ayurvedic perspective, however Ayurveda frames pandemic.
So I took the reference from the Charak Samhita. And this is very similar in terms of a guidebook to Patanjali in yoga, or in yogic philosophy, because this is kind of what those of us who study Ayurveda refer to as a manual, and it covers, strangely enough, it has 8 divisions, just like Patanjali's 8 limbs. I mean, it's a very interesting parallel, but there is actually a section on pandemic, on this idea of widespread disease from an external place. And the discussion is the root cause, which is the discussion of every disease in Ayurveda, is what is the pathogenesis, what is the pathology that actually happens. And briefly, what it says is it uses the term prajnaparada, which is one of the causes of disease in an Ayurvedic context. Now, this is also a yogic term, which you can talk about, but what it literally means is crimes against intellect. Now, crimes against intellect means I know better. I have this in my mind. I know what's going to help me. I know what's going to be true, but I'm going to do something else. And I think we all, as human beings, have that capacity to do that. And maybe more often, some of us more often than others. But that is the essence of what is causing this type of, or any type of pandemic. And the Prajnaparada is actually the result of the lack of discernment of our global community. In other words, the leaders of our community begin to lose their discernment. They start to prioritize, in this case, maybe greed, self-interest. It becomes very reactionary, and this creates a weakness in the entire community. And literally what the Charak says is that the gods leave the situation. And the gods leave, leaving man and all the constituents of nature, which is man, to fend for itself. Now, God, or the moral compass of one, is when it leaves, it brings the reactionary and volatile forms of nature in the forefront. So everything becomes erratic and wild and unpredictable. And so nature, and we can see it. I mean, we've been seeing it for a while now, the wild swings of weather and the unpredictability of it and the lack of order in it. And so the Charak really explained this as the gods leaving the place, leaving the picture. And so you can see how that would happen in the case of Prajnaparada in its severe form, especially when it's affected all the leaders of the world and the community at large. So that's the that's the context in which it was told. And then the next stage of it, which we have not reached, and as a matter of fact, I think we're seeing a response to it. But in the Charak, it explains that we lose the plants. The plants begin to become.
Hi, Susie.
The plants become powerless, and they fail to help us, and they cease to have potency. And isn't it interesting that we're seeing more people gardening and getting their hands into the ground? Isn't it amazing how our natural inclination to balance is there, to get our hands dirty and to plant? There are more people I know that are planting that have never planted before. So, I think that that's an internal defense against what can happen, according to the Charak, when the plants stop helping. And then the antidote would be sattva, to cultivate sattva, which the gunas, I know that you are very well versed in the gunas, sattva, rajas, and tamas. Those are the three states of being. And if we can cultivate sattva in ourselves, right diet, right action, plenty of sleep, and selfless service, and we cultivate sattva in ourselves and in the environment around us, then we have the antidote to this Prajnaparada. Then we can start reversing the trend.
It's so profound, and it is also of great interest because, it's said that Patanjali wrote 3 different texts. One was for the purification of the mind. That's the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. Another was for the purification of speech, and this was a commentary on Panini's grammar. And then the third one was for the purification of the body. So Patanjali is also said to have authored an Ayurveda text or done a commentary on an Ayurveda text.
Yeah.
Which one was that? I'm not sure which one it was. It's really slipping my mind.
Well, interestingly enough, there are some schools of thought that think that Patanjali and Charak are one and the same. Charak
Okay.
actually means wanderer. So,
Okay.
and the Charak is a Samhita is a treatise, so it's a compilation. So
Charaka
it's very,
Samhita.
yeah.
Okay, so I believe it was the Charaka Samhita that we learned Patanjali also authored. So in our
Yeah.
invocation that we do before we begin studying the Yoga Sutra, it honors Patanjali for authoring these 3 treatises on the very practices that are aiming, the very manuals that help us to purify the mind, the body, as well as the speech.
Uh-huh.
So this idea of the charaka having 8 different sort of segments to it, and Patanjali's yoga having 8 different segments is very interesting. And I think it alludes to the fact that, I don't know, maybe 8 was his lucky number or something. But anyway, if we look at the Yoga Sutra, and particularly in the 4th chapter, which is, it's the last chapter of the Yoga Sutra. It's not a chapter that's taught very often, because the insinuation is that we will have gone through the preparatory practices so that we can even begin to fathom what deep transformation, how the process of deep transformation evolves. Mm-hmm. So when I read your email, and now even more so, in our conversation, what I am looking at is in the beginning of the 4th chapter of the Yoga Sutra, Patanjali describes to us 2 different types of minds: the leader mind and the sort of follower mind, and how the composition from a guna perspective of the leader mind is the most instrumental for raising up the health of a population, of a student, of a population. But it's the leader mind. It's literally called the leader mind. And it kind of diffuses, is how it's worded. It diffuses out into the population. So it's not contained within the leader. And so if the leader mind is full of what we would call in yoga kleshas, which are probably, I would say, a combination of gunas, like all the gunas would combine in different sort of levels in order to create kleshas. But in general, it's the kleshas that will render a leader's mind to be one way or another. And even in the Yoga Sutra, it tells us that just because you're a yogi doesn't mean you're good. So I remember when we were learning this, I remember 2 really strong examples that our teachers in India used. They asked us questions, and they said, so was the mastermind, I started learning in India the year of 9/11. 2001, I think it was. So one of the questions that came up in the year or 2 that were following that was the mastermind behind 9/11, and I know we all may have very different ideas of what 9/11 was, and who did it and who was responsible, but was the mastermind behind 9/11 a yogi? That was the question that came up.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm. And so if we pull from the entire text, ultimately the answer was no, because if ahimsa is the first
yama,
it's the first yama, and yama being the first of the 8 limbs of yoga, then no, it wasn't, because obviously the point of that was to cause himsa. So no, the mastermind was not a yogi? And
Right.
then another question that came up is the Godfather a yogi? You know, from Marlon Brando, Godfather, is the Godfather a yogi? And again, you know, I mean, they rarely gave us answers, but, you know, gave us questions so that we can look into it and figure it out on our own. And again,
Yeah.
it's no. But right after the sutra that speaks about the leader mind and how pivotal it is in what happens in the yoga process between teacher and student, or between teacher and students, and we see so much of a breakdown in the teacher-student relationship. It had to be happening then as well. This isn't new, that gurus
Right.
engage in manipulation and terrible crossing of boundaries and
Right.
wind up harming their students. This isn't new. It was there, it's here. But right after that sutra, Patanjali does talk about 4 different kinds of yogis, right? So there's the type of yogi or leader that is neither dark nor light. And in this sense, we would say that that is someone whose mind is samatvam, that
Mm-hmm.
may go sometimes dark and light, but has found the balance and is predominantly the sattva type of mind. A karma yogi is what this
Mm-hmm.
type of yogi is called. So there is a karma yogi, and ultimately that's really the one that we want to raise up into leadership.
Right.
There is also the dark yogi, so the masterminds behind, you know, wars that have financial gain as their initiation, right? Or these devastating attacks on humanity, whether it is the creation of diseases that are then put into the world and for the purpose of harming population, or population control, or, you know, whatever ills against humanity are being performed. They require some planning.
Mm-hmm.
They require some planning. So that would be in the category of dark yogi, someone who's done a lot of work to do something really insidious and harmful.
Mm-hmm.
Then there's also the, you know, the white or shukla, the light, we'll call it the light yogi, which is sort of all good.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes a leader who has so much goodness may be ignorant to the where the shoe pinches, so to speak. It's not
Mm-hmm.
so easy for a leader who's purely white, maybe some type of, let's say, a renunciant or something that doesn't really have that type of experience. That might not be our best leader either. Karma, Shukla, Krishnam. And then you have like both, you know, both white and dark. So if we look at this sort of model, we want somebody who has some type of balance, but has done the work to be able to reduce their own kleshas. So we want that's, you know, the ignorance with which we go into the world. It's the identification, right? You know, I'm a leader. I'm like, I must be worshipped. I can never be wrong, right? So
Mm-hmm.
this misidentification of who we actually are, and this kind of building of identities to promote popularity, or whatever this is, right?
Sure. Sure.
Raga, you know, desire and all the desire and greed for whatever it is that is going to make us really comfortable. And then we also have the aversion, or the, you know, the judgment, the hatred, the oppressiveness, the oppression, as well as the fear, right? So if the leader mind is allowed to sort of flourish in that terrible murk of all of these at high level, it will only follow that the population will also experience the same, because we come away from our connection with what is nurturing, what is good, what is healthy, what is right, what choices to make to facilitate
Yeah.
the flourishing of a culture. So it's also there in the Yoga Sutra, and I didn't really think of it in terms of how I just described it to you until you shared your Ayurveda's version of pandemic. It's all really, really interconnected, which is why I think that the work of yoga therapy and the work of Ayurveda intermingle so well, because we're really looking at the same initiating concepts. And
I would call it the same truth.
yeah.
You know, the same truth, different garment.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and that's an important discussion for another time, but we have to talk about truth. Because right now we're living in this world that we are relying so heavily on science. But we have to remember that science is a form of truth that changes. What we knew 20 years ago as truth in science, we don't know that as truth anymore, because things evolve and things develop. And so it's a truth on the one hand, but it's not really the truth that you and I are talking about in terms of this universal truth that exists regardless, that we can talk about and we can teach, but resides within us as something that we live by. That's a different truth. That is the essential truth. That is the truth, as opposed to this truth that we're hanging on to, which can create so much confusion.
Oh, yeah.
And when we're feeling confused by truth, our minds go crazy, because we're like, how can I be confused about the truth? Because it's not truth. It's not the truth that we really know. It's the truth that is constantly evolving. I mean, I'll just add that in terms of.
Yeah.
But I think that the four leaders and is such an interesting concept. And again, you know, at some point we can talk about the various stages of sattva, the various stages of rajas, the various stages of tamas, and how that creates these personalities, and how we evolve through them, you know, constantly. And that's also a yogic concept, Ayurvedic concept. One and the same.
I love this. So, all right. I think we covered a lot of really important concepts today and gave more, even each other, even more to reflect on, which I feel like as practitioners is so important, that we continue to not just learn intellectually, but give ourselves times to metabolize what it is we've learned and its relevancy for this current time. So I want to thank you for doing that for me.
For me too. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that.
And I also want to thank everyone who came
Yeah,
to join us today. Yeah, I know I saw some of our friends kind of come in and go out, and I hope that you will watch it again if it resonated with you, as well as join us in our collaborations that we're doing this month. We have 2 of them. One will be on one will be on Ayurveda. I confuse the 2 all the time because they are one and the same. Ayurveda for summer with Jill, and that will be next Tuesday, June 2nd from 6:30 to 8. It will be online, as we are not allowed to open yet. It's not the safe thing to do at this moment. So it will be online. And then June 20th, that's a Saturday at 4 p.m., I will be giving a talk on yoga therapy for Everveda.
So excited about that. I hope I'm going to make sure that everybody is aware of it so they can get a benefit to all of your wisdom.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to end our video, and I'm also going to try to save it. So wish me luck. I haven't done that before. I'm still learning all of this. And have a beautiful day. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone.
Bye, everybody.
Ciao.